Okay, I think it's 5 minutes past the hour. Let's go ahead and get started. Morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We have Dr. Gleb Tsipursky here with us to give. He's an external speaker. He's here to talk to us about optimizing hybrid work, which we all know is a hot topic for many of us in our industry. A little bit about Dr. Gleb. Dr. Gleb is a cutting-edge thought leader in helping tech and manufacturing executives drive collaboration, innovation, and retention in hybrid work. He serves as the CEO of the boutique Future of Work consultancy firm, Disaster Avoidance Experts. He's also authored 7 best-selling books. His newest book is called Leading Hybrid and Remote Teams, a manual on benchmarking to best practices for competitive advantage. He's also published over 650 articles and given over 550 interviews for prominent organizations like the Harvard Business Review, USA Today, and Fortune. His thought leadership has been translated into over 7 languages. Dr. Gleb's expertise comes from over 20 years of consulting, coaching, as well as training. His clients include Fortune 500 companies ranging from Applied to Xerox. His expertise also comes from his research background as a behavioral scientist with 15 years in academia. That includes 7 as a professor at Ohio State University, at the Decision Science Collaborative, where he wrote dozens of peer-reviewed articles. Dr. Gleb is a proud Ukrainian. In his free time, he makes sure to spend abundant quality time with his wife to avoid his personal life turning into a disaster. I met Dr. Gleb when he presented at the CEO Strategy Kickoff meeting in April this year. I found him to be fun, engaging, full of original ideas, and with the conviction to challenge accepted and standard wisdom. The main idea here is that we want to hear and amplify all voices in the room and otherwise. And this is the main reason I invited him to share with you all about optimizing hybrid work. And I'll hand it off to Dr. Gleb.
All right. Thank you very much. Really appreciate it. Appreciate the kind introduction and appreciate you all coming here. So let's focus on how you do hybrid work effectively. We're going to look at BKM's best known methods for optimizing innovation, addressing burnout and proximity bias, and integration of junior staff for the EPI business unit. I'm going to ask you to keep yourself on mute. There's the mute button at the bottom left of your screen. Unless you want to make a comment or need to do something, you can also use the chat feature in the middle of your screen to do that. We'll be doing polling throughout the presentation. You will be able to see a poll and click on it pretty easily. It should be self-explanatory. All right, everyone. With that out of the way.
Dr. Gleb, one quick announcement.
Yes.
I'm going to start recording the meeting. So I just want to make sure everyone's okay with that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'll take that as a yes, and I'll start recording.
Great. Okay, perfect. So I want to start by talking about the ways that we think about hybrid work and feel about hybrid work. What is the approach that we take to hybrid work? It's kind of a broader framework discussion of thinking before diving deep into problem solving around hybrid work. And I'm going to do that through talking about a completely different topic about thinking. That's my area of expertise, behavioral science, cognitive science. How do we think? So I want to ask you a question. And this is separate, completely separate from work of just thinking about what you would do in your regular life. It's 10 a.m. Pacific. If you're in a different area, whatever it is time for you, I'm in the Eastern time zone, so it's 1 p.m. for me. But for you on Pacific time, you're going to have lunch in an hour-ish or so, maybe after this presentation. And when you go for your lunch option, let's say you have 2 options for ice cream. One option contains 10% fat. Another contains 90% fat-free. So think about it. One ice cream is 10% fat. It contains 10% fat. The other is 90% fat-free. Which of these ice creams sounds most appealing to you? So I will run a poll, and you will be able to see the poll. So which of these would you prefer? So please go ahead and vote. You'll be able to vote on 90% fat-free or 10% fat. Which of these would you like? Okay. Good. So we see that of all of us, there's a clear preference for 10% fat, right? Very strong preference for something that's 10% fat and not a strong preference for 90% fat-free. So 10% fat wins out. But if you think about it, 90% fat-free means it's 10% fat. If it's 10% fat, it means it's 90% fat-free. These are the same, absolutely the same. Sarah asks if I chose both, do I get to eat both? Maybe, maybe you just eat half of each. So
Gleb, sorry to interrupt with one quick housekeeping thing. I think as a host, you need to give me permission to record. So if you don't mind clicking, if you see.
Right. I see what you're saying. So yeah, I think you left and then you didn't, you were not the co-host. So yes, good. So you have co-host privileges now.
Okay,
so
perfect. Thank
we
you.
see very clear preference. And if this was random, if people were just clicking randomly, then we would not see such clear differences, right? So we see clear differences in how the information is presented. But 2/3 of you, twice as many chose 10% fat as chose 90% fat-free. So this difference, this 90% fat-free versus 10% fat, is very stark. And that is because of framing, the way that we frame something. So you can see these results. It's a very clear difference. The way that information is presented to us, even the same information, very much influences the way we make our decisions. And that's something for you all as leaders to know and think about. How are you making your decisions? And how are the people who you lead making their decisions based on how information is presented? This is called the framing effect. So the framing effect is one of these cognitive biases, dangerous judgment errors that I talk about in my book. And you'll get a copy of the book if you want it at the end of the presentation. So you'll a digital copy of the book. How we see and interpret the world is determined by how the information is presented to us. So how might various perspectives on hybrid work and how we approach hybrid work might shape your perspective about the world and your team's perspective about the world? I want you to really think about this issue. It's a fundamental question. And the reason it's a fundamental question is because the vast majority of people perceive fundamental work as a loss, as a problem, as something that many leaders perceive it as something that is a loss compared to the previous dynamics, to what they were doing earlier. That, oh, hey, being in the office, that was great. And now we have to do this hybrid work and it's a mess. I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to get teams to collaborate, to innovate, how to integrate junior team members. Maybe we should just go back to the office, right? What people are not seeing sufficiently is that hybrid work is not a loss, it's a disruption. That is how you should frame it in your own mind and for your teams and for those other managers under you. You should frame it as a disruption because it's a disruption in our world. It's a fundamental change. We are not going back to January 2020 ever. People that are not going there. Clearly applied is not going there. And it's a disruption that means that you can take advantage of disruptions. You can see it as an opportunity, as a challenge, not a problem, as something that you can use to seize competitive advantage in the future of work. So I want you to be thinking about this as a disruption. This is how you should frame this to yourself and to others. So the winners of tomorrow, I can guarantee to you, will be the ones who seize leadership in hybrid work. To do so, these future winners need to put aside default assumptions, habits, and preferences. And you want to focus on business objectives and outcomes. Some things might be personally uncomfortable to do. The way to innovate in hybrid work and remote work is going to be uncomfortable if you're not used to it. The way to address burnout, proximity bias, integration of junior team members is not necessarily going to be comfortable, but it's going to be very effective. So it's the best known methods on hybrid work. And that is what you need at EPBU to seize internal within applied and external strategic competitive advantage in the future of work. So that's what I want you to be thinking about as you go forward. All right. Now that we're clear on that, let's talk about the challenges that we face. We have people who are not sufficiently oriented toward the data. And I'm going to give you some data that definitely correlates with internal applied data as well. So we have 8 major external independent surveys that show that 75 to 85% of workers who can work at least part-time remotely. Maybe they need access to physical research resources to do some research and have to come in 1 day or 2 days a week or something like that. Or maybe they can do all their work remotely, like software programmers or financial staff. They do not want traditional office-centric work, 4 to 5 days a week or even 3 days a week. 4 to 50% would leave their job if forced to come in full-time. And that is a huge number. And we know that at Applied, we have numbers of, we see that about 1/3 of all people on surveys would want full-time remote work. At Applied, it's closer to the low double digits, so something like 15 or so percent, if I remember the last Applied survey on this correctly. So this, we still see that a lot of people at Applied want full-time remote work, but most people at Applied want hybrid work of something like a day or 2 a week in the office. And we know that not having office-centric work, having hybrid work, remote work, is much better for retention and productivity. So there was a recent random assignment study at the company Trip.com. So Trip.com, it's a major booking agency, as you can guess from the name. It sees this very popular website, Trip.com, and it assigned half of its staff of software engineers, marketers, and financial staff to come to the office full-time, and half of them to come in on a hybrid schedule, And it ran this experiment. It was a randomized control trial. It did it in collaboration with Stanford University. So it had that collaboration. And it found that the people who were doing hybrid work versus fully office-centric work had 35% better retention, like very clear numbers. And they had quite a bit higher productivity. And productivity for financial staff and marketers is a bit softer, but for software engineers, they wrote 8% more code, which is a very hard metric. Like that's very hard, clear metric for productivity improvement. So people are quite a bit more productive when working remotely. On average, they work about 20 more hours per month, which is not surprising because they don't have a commute. They don't have that over an hour a day eaten up by the commute and the transitions associated with it. And they can have much better focus. And this is what internal applied surveys indicate as well, that focus time is very helpful and people get more work done in that focus time. And of course, they have more flexibility with their schedule, which is also quite helpful for getting work done because some people are night owls, some people are morning doves, and they prefer to work at 6 a.m. Some people prefer to work at 6 p.m. outside of the traditional 9 to 5 work schedule. That contributes to productivity. Now, there was a longitudinal study by Stanford University, which found that remote work is getting more productive over time. In May 2020, remote workers were 5% more productive on average. In August 2022, they became 9% more productive on average compared to in-office workers. Why is that? Well, because people learned how to do remote work better. They set up their home offices much better than in May 2020 with the suddenness of the transition. Teams learned how to collaborate together better in remote settings. Leaders learned how to lead better. Companies, of course, invested a lot in back-end technology and collaboration software, all of these sorts of things, supporting some companies. So I consulted for 19 companies, and many of them supported their staff with home office furnishings and technology. So all of that really improved the ability of workers to do remote work. So this is the numbers, this is statistics, this is very clear data. I want to talk about some of the mistakes that are made around remote work and hybrid work in general. This is the biggest one. So I'm not going to go in depth into them so that we can get to the techniques to do hybrid work effectively. But the biggest cognitive bias, the biggest dangerous judgment error on the future of work that I've seen is called functional fixedness. Functional fixedness. What's that about? So functional fixedness is You've probably heard the phrase that when you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. Well, when you learn one right way of functioning, collaborating together, doing innovation, doing collaboration, doing integration of junior staff, doing mentoring of junior staff, addressing burnout, you tend to apply that to all the other contexts, even when those contexts are not a good fit. So there are so many companies, including Applied, from my interviews with Applied folks, that transpose their office-based culture on hybrid and remote work. So they kind of shoehorned that office-based culture into hybrid and remote work. And we have research showing that does not work very well. You really need to adopt new techniques, ones that are native to the hybrid and remote setting, to be effective at it. But that's not what many companies did. They have not yet adapted these new techniques, which is one of the reasons I'm presenting to you. So you want to address that and adapt effectively, strategically, to innovate anywhere and collaborate everywhere. Now, with that in mind, I'm curious for the folks here, how many of you think that functional fixedness is something that will be valuable to address at EPBU? So how valuable would it be to address functional fixedness at EPBU? Please go ahead and vote. And of course, your votes are anonymous, so don't worry about that. So please go ahead and vote. I see something like 10%. Two of you participated. You should be able to all participate. So please go ahead and vote.
It disappeared from my side.
Yeah.
Yeah, the
Okay.
poll went away.
Okay, let me restart. Let me relaunch the poll. Weird. Okay, so please, if you voted before, please vote again and go ahead and everyone vote. Okay, see, 73% of you participated, so let's give 5 more seconds for those who didn't yet. All right, so you can very clearly see that over half of you think that this is a serious issue that needs to be addressed. It would be highly valuable to address it. And then 40% of you think it would be moderately valuable to address it, which still seems like that should be addressed. So this is clearly an issue, and you resonate with what I just shared about the statistics, about the problems of functional fixedness. So this is really important. Clearly it's important, and clearly you see that it's important. So let's talk about how to address this. The biggest opportunities for the EPI business unit, from my conversations with Vidya and others on hybrid work, are to adopt best known methods in 3 areas: innovation in hybrid settings, addressing burnout and proximity bias for hybrid staff, and then integration of junior team members in a hybrid context. I'll go over all 3. So let's talk about innovation first. That seems to be the biggest opportunity for the EPBU, given your developments in technologies, things that are coming in the next few months and the next couple of years. There are a lot of opportunities for you to pursue innovation in this area. And the way to do it is to replace that traditional synchronous brainstorming with virtual asynchronous brainstorming. This is a very useful technique. Traditional brainstorming is quite useful for innovation. It's when you get together into a room and you start sharing your ideas, and ideas are flying. There are 2 specific aspects of brainstorming that research shows are really beneficial for creating ideas. One of them is called synergy, where when somebody has an idea and then you are inspired by their idea to have an idea that you wouldn't have had before. So that's one benefit of that traditional brainstorming. Another benefit of that traditional brainstorming is social facilitation, where when you're in a room with others, when you know that others are working on the same things that you do, you're more inspired and engaged. But traditional brainstorming has serious problems, which we've known about since the 70s and 80s. One of them is called production blocking. Production blocking is when you have an idea, but somebody else is talking about another idea in that room, and then somebody else responds to that person, and they go off on a different topic than you did, and you feel reluctant to interrupt. This is especially problematic for people who are lower status in the hierarchy and people who are more introverted. So those are the people for whom this is particularly a problem. And from what I hear, that results in a lot of ideas being missed because people who are introverted are not contributing as much, and people who have a fresh perspective, so newer, younger people, junior staff, aren't being heard as much. Big problem. Evaluation apprehension. That's when people are afraid of sharing an idea because it seems too out of the box, too different from others, maybe implicitly critical of what the team is doing already. And especially when someone shared an idea and it's in the evaluation stage of brainstorming, feel reluctant to criticize that idea. So this is evaluation apprehension. And it's again a big, big problem, particularly for people who are junior. So we talked about that, and particularly for people who are so that lower status, and particularly for people who tend to be pessimistic. They tend to have a pessimistic personality. So that's evaluation apprehension. Next is social loafing. So that's just the quality of our brain, that our brain is lazy, and the more people there are in the room, the less reluctant our brain is to work hard. So that is social loafing. That's a problem. And to address that problem, there were a number of techniques already developed in the early 1990s, so long before remote work, to address production blocking, evaluation apprehension, and social loafing. There were techniques developed around asynchronous brainstorming. So these techniques, I mean, I can go into them in the Q&A, but the crucial thing about them is that I adapted them to the virtual context to fit hybrid work. It solves all of these problems, so these techniques. So let's talk about virtually synchronous brainstorming. What does that involve? Here are the 3 key steps for virtually synchronous brainstorming. Step 1, all team members generate and input ideas asynchronously and anonymously. Asynchronously, meaning not at the same time, and anonymously. There are 2 ways of anonymity here. You can make anonymity optional, where people can choose to share their name or not share their name. You can force people to share their name, but only the leader would see their name if the leader can take it off the spreadsheet that's provided, that's created after doing this. So, or you can make it fully anonymous with no option to share your name. And that depends on the goal. If you're want to do some red teaming, some failure proofing for what you're doing in the organization, in your team, you might want to do it fully anonymous. No one can see your name. If you want to do something else, like generate creative, spontaneous ideas, you might want people to be able to get credit for their ideas. Now, what are the benefits of this? It's very helpful for introverted team members and lower status ones. You don't have that problem of production blocking. So that addresses the problem of production blocking because you can share your idea without any problem right away. So this is very helpful for people who are lower status, get many more fresh ideas, and people who are introverted and who would not be sharing their ideas otherwise. And from what I've heard from EPBU folks, definitely this would be valuable for EPBU. Anonymity is very helpful for pessimistic team members, people who feel more anxious. So people who are pessimistic, they see the grass as yellow on the other side of the hill, not green. And these are people who feel more anxious about social judgments, about sharing ideas that aren't perfect. So this is something that would be helpful for them with that personality and for people who are lower status, fresher, more junior, recent team members. That's the first step. Second, all team members anonymously comment on, and then you evaluate quantitatively each idea on a scale of 0 to 5 for how innovative, practical, and exciting it is. Those are standard categories. You can add other ones for EPBU, for example, how much it fits the current project, whatever you want to do. So there are a number of categories on which you rate it, and you have a spreadsheet, so it's easy to rate it, and then you comment on it. And that commenting is very helpful because that gets the synergy going, where you see some ideas and then you are inspired by those ideas and you can comment on those ideas to tweak them, improve them, change them around for the future. So that gets you that synergy going. And of course, because you're doing all of this together, you get that social facilitation going. So you're getting both benefits of traditional brainstorming. And step 3 is a synchronous meeting to determine how to implement the best ideas. Now, step 1 and step 2 are done from your home office. You don't need to be in person to do them. Step 3 is for most people best done I recommend the teams come in and do that in person. if practical. Remote teams, globally distributed teams, completely fine to not do this in person. But for most people, it's going to be best, most folks, most teams, best done to do this in person. And here you already don't have the evaluation apprehension going because the ideas are rated. You can see very clearly which ideas floated to the top and what are the comments on them. And you can just focus on implementing, figuring out how to implement the best ideas. So you choose the 1 or 2 or 3 best ideas, or maybe more, and you implement. And the rest of the ideas, one of the big benefits of this is that you get an idea bank. You get these ideas that are written down, commented, and evaluated. Some ideas might not be right for right now, but they might be right for 6 months from now. And so unlike traditional brainstorming, where all of these ideas are lost, you put these into an idea bank. And this is great for the future. So companies with which I work have found that they are reaching back into the idea bank and retrieving ideas from the past for the future. And the peer-reviewed studies show that there are more total ideas and more novel ideas than traditional brainstorming. No question about it. This is a very, very effective technique. Now, can I share my screen? And
Dr. Gleb,
yes.
I have a question. Sorry to interrupt.
Yes, please go ahead.
This step number 2,
Yes.
where we evaluate on the ideas, what's the typical procedure like? Do we give people certain period of time, or people comment on it, then the idea generator comments back? What's a use case that you've seen most beneficial?
So it depends on how much time you have. If you're doing this in a shortened period of time, then everyone gets a spreadsheet. So let's say you're using Google Forms, and we'll go through the process in a bit. So let's say you're using Microsoft Forms, right? You use MS Teams, and then everyone gets a spreadsheet with all of the ideas generated. Let's say that there are, when I did this at the CEO kickoff meeting, there were 82 ideas generated in total from that meeting. But you have, let's say, but there were something like 300 global leaders generating ideas at the same time. So let's say you have a team of 6 people and you generate 20 ideas. And then each person gets a copy of the spreadsheet. And you have the spreadsheet with the ideas, and there are 3 categories that are there. There's the third, there are column, first column ideas, second, third, fourth column are categories to the practical, exciting, and novel. And you put for each one 0 for 5. On each of those categories. And then the fifth column is for notes, where you leave your comment on each one. And then all of those are agglomerated together by the facilitator. So you get to see everyone's, again, all of these are anonymous, and you're agglomerated together. You see everyone's ideas and their average ratings through the spreadsheets. So that is if you're doing it in a shortened period of time, which, that's one. If you want for a more extensive project, then you can do this step again. So you can do step 1, 2, and then do another step 1 and 2. So repeat that step 1 and 2 so that you generate more ideas. So it depends on the importance and value of the project.
Okay. So maybe if later on we're going through a use case, that'll be helpful for everyone to kind of see. So I'll wait.
Excellent. Okay, good. So let me go through the use case right now. This will be easy enough. So if you are unable to access the link in the chat, you can go to this. Let's see, hold on. You can go to tinyurl.com/epitaxi innovation, but most of you should be able to access the link in the chat. So go to the link in the chat, please. And what I want you to do, once you go to the link in the chat, is input ideas on how the EpiBU can be using this technique for its benefit. So what you'll see when you go to this link is this form, so Google Forms form. And you'll see your ideas. So submit one idea at a time. So please share your ideas about where and how the EpiBU or your team in particular might apply this technique. Share about applying the method in a specific project, specific process, certain types of meetings. please submit each idea separately. So submit your idea one idea at a time, and you can optionally share your name. Choose to share your name or not share your name. So please go ahead. Let's take a couple of minutes to do this right now. All right, everyone, please go ahead and share your ideas. And you should be able to see ideas popping up right here. So please go ahead and share your ideas. Again, you can choose to share your name. You could choose to not share your name, whatever you believe would be useful. And we'll be taking a couple of minutes. After the presentation, you'll all get a copy of this spreadsheet, so you can all be inspired by it and think about where you can use this technique. We're almost at 20. So clearly lots of ideas here. Let's get some more ideas. So you see, you have at the same time, when you're doing this, what I'm talking about, you have social facilitation going because you're all doing this together. So you're kind of inspired by everyone doing it together. You know you're doing this as part of the team. And then you know that you can be inspired by synergy. So when you see somebody's idea, and then you're inspired by their idea to share another idea. We have about a minute left. So please go ahead and share more ideas. Let's see if we can get to at least 25. 22 now. And we have about 40 seconds left. So please go ahead and share your ideas if you haven't yet. Okay, good. 24, 25, 26. Excellent, good. And we still have 20 seconds to go. Excellent, we even got to 30. Perfect. Okay, I'll stop sharing this and you can still continue sharing your ideas. You'll all get a copy of the spreadsheet later. So let me actually do this so that I explain what would happen next. Next, you would see everyone would get a copy of the spreadsheet. So create your own copy of the spreadsheet. And then we put in columns here called practical, citing, innovative comments. And then you would rate each one. For example, you'd say this one is a 3 on practical, but it's very exciting because it's very innovative. So for example, and then you would share your comments about this. And that would happen for each person who is taking place in this. And then you would simply add up for each idea all of the practical, exciting, innovative, and see what the outcomes are. And then you can, so that would give you the score for each idea, and you would see the comments for each idea at the end. So that is a facilitated process where the facilitator would simply add them up. Very easy to do with spreadsheets, right? And you want to know spreadsheets a little bit. So that would be how this technique works. And again,
Dr. Greg,
yes.
I have another question.
Yes, please.
So this was on Google Forms.
Yeah.
For applied, we have
Microsoft Forms, right?
It
It
does
works
it
the
work
same way.
exactly the same way? Okay.
It works exactly the same way. Yep, exactly.
And let's
I just
say,
good.
sorry, let's say we have to do a little bit more in-depth idea generation. What's the recommendation in terms of synchronous? We kind of did, idea more synchronous versus asynchronous when people are thinking on their own.
That's right.
We lose that connection, if you will, or chain of thought, right? In the sense that I come up with a certain idea, someone else says, "Oh yeah, that makes sense." How about we modify it this way, and so forth. But with the asynchronous generation, how do we kind of get that back into the fold?
That's at the synchronous meeting. So at step 3 in the last meeting, you have an opportunity to talk about, oh, hey, here's how we can modify idea number 3 using elements from idea number 5. And here's, and you can also do this for comments on the ideas. So here are all the comments, let's improve the ideas. So the synchronous meeting is an opportunity to do that. That is one way. Another way is to repeat steps number 1 and 2, which you can do, which I recommend doing for larger, more important projects. So if you're kind of a strategic planning going forward, that's the approach there.
Because if you see, if you go back to that that list, right? I think a lot of people talked about, we need to brainstorm around new chamber design, a very complicated question. So for that specific project, for example, how do we bring in, the next level of thought process, the next level of brainstorming?
So what I would recommend doing is having something like a 1-week process of having people sharing ideas asynchronously, and then have an hour session where people share ideas synchronously, and you could see other people sharing their ideas. And then after that hour of virtual co-working, you stop, and then everyone gets the spreadsheet, copy of the spreadsheet, and everyone rates it. So rated, each of the ideas and comments on it. And so that way you get the benefits of asynchronicity, which is very helpful, especially for introverted people and for people who want to take some time. And then you get the benefits of synchronicity. So you get that synergy going where you're inspired by other people and what they're sharing.
Understand.
Okay, good. I know this is important. So are there other people with questions?
Question.
Yes.
For the asynchronous thinking also, is there a need to have?
I think there's an issue with the mic, with your microphone. Maybe you can type out in the chat your question.
Framework put for asynchronous thinking as well.
Okay, so I heard something about asynchronous thinking. I think there was an issue with the microphone. Can you repeat the question? Or you can just put it in the chat. Oh. Okay, so that framework, meaning time, I think you mean time. So like I said, for a more complex project, you'd want something like a week. For a less complex project, something like a day. So that it depends on the topic and how many people are involved. If you're a global team, you want a day for everyone to be able to participate. So the framework is generally just the timing available, and that would be my recommendation. That's what I've seen in other companies that have done this. And so just thinking about the timing available. You're welcome. All right, everyone, let's go on. And so let's talk about another topic, which would be how to solve burnout and proximity bias. So moving on to this topic. So proximity bias is, of course, the worries by hybrid workers about career advancement is one, because they're not seen as much in the workplace. And there's some envy by campus-centric workers for hybrid ones. So both of those are proximity bias, where the proximity of people or the lack thereof causes some kind of biased thinking, some kind of errors in thinking. What a solution to this is to establish a culture, true culture of excellence from anywhere, focusing on where you do your work and focusing on outputs and deliverables, not inputs, not where you do your work, but really the outputs, the deliverables, what you're doing. So it doesn't matter where you work. It doesn't matter the kind of inputs. What matters are the outputs. And as part of that, strongly recommend doing small-scale performance evaluations at weekly one-on-ones, which helps team members always know where they stand and gives them psychological safety. So that small-scale performance evaluation is not once a year major performance evaluation. So people always know where they stand. What these one-on-ones is very helpful to do is to have 3 to 5 goals for each week. That's part of your performance evaluation. Then the team member sends to their team lead the day before the one-on-one a report on how they did on their goals for the week. And then at the actual one-on-one, they talk about the goals. The team leader might coach them a little bit on how to solve problems that they encountered. And then there is an evaluation process where the individual team member gives a self-evaluation and the team leader addresses the self-evaluation, approves it or revises it, and then that's fed into a continuous promotion and evaluation process. So people therefore know exactly where they stand. And what is the issue that causes hybrid workers to overwork is anxiety. They don't know where they stand and they don't know what their relationship is like with their boss. Even if you have weekly one-on-ones, that's great. But if you don't have that performance evaluation as part of it, for hybrid workers, especially fully remote workers, that's a very big challenge. But if there's a performance evaluation and a culture of excellence from anywhere that, the focus is on deliverables, not where you work, not how you work, then you will address that burnout. So you'll prevent burnout. People will not overwork. They'll set boundaries. They know they have that psychological safety for knowing where they are. And that will, of course, help you improve retention. So that is the agreement on the weekly goals. And that is how you solve burnout and proximity bias. Now, are there questions on this approach to solving burnout and proximity bias?
So, Dr. Gleb, one question I had.
Yes.
Sorry, and this will help. One question I had was, in terms of this kind of an issue, don't you think that there is some level of homogeneity in a kind of particular family of job functions? So this type of feeling setting in would be less of a problem if there is some level of kind of homogeneity in terms of most people are doing hybrid or most people are on site all the time. Or have you seen this kind of, is this a cross-functional thing that you're referring to in terms of across job families and in an org in general?
Right. It's across job families, which is why you have that performance evaluation. You have that standardized performance evaluation, that one-on-one with those weekly performance evaluations, and that everyone has that equality. So remember that proximity bias. People feel, if there is across job families, they feel that, well, some people are coming in more, some people are coming in less. Are those people who are coming in more going to get promoted because of the natural, intuitive feelings of closeness? But if you have that promotion and evaluation system, then you always know where you stand. So each week you get an evaluation, I don't know, from 0 to 4. And there, if you know that your average is a 3, that means that, okay, you are doing pretty well, not as well as you could be. And then you talk each week with your supervisor on what you would need to do to raise that to like a 3.5 or something like that. So that is, that everyone is doing it. So you don't have to work extra hard if you're coming in a hybrid schedule, which would lead to burnout. But that's where it's coming from, that anxiety that can lead to burnout. So that is a very helpful technique to address those problems.
Got it.
Dr. Gleb,
yes.
Piggybacking on what Abhishek asked, is this more of a problem for new people or relatively junior people, where they feel like they still have to prove to the group or their manager, and weekly one-on-one specifically evaluating performance is the recommendation, or you found that's the best case, versus, let's say, if somebody is more experienced, they have a bunch of things under their belt, they are more comfortable in their skin, it's more, it doesn't have to be weekly, maybe it's bi-weekly, or maybe it's monthly.
Yeah. So that's what I find for people who are in more experienced or more managerial levels. You move that to a bi-weekly or a monthly. No fewer than monthly. No fewer than monthly, you found is challenging because people still don't know where they stand. But monthly is okay for people who are really experienced. But the less experienced people are, and especially early onward as you're getting this set up, weekly is quite helpful, and especially for more junior people. Yes. Now, remember that you do see, as part of this great resignation, a lot of managers leaving, a lot of people who are senior and experienced leaving, partially because they have this anxiety. They don't know how their career is going to develop. They don't know where they stand. So it's very easy to underdo this as opposed to overdo this. So I would default toward doing it more frequently rather than less frequently. And that's what we've seen improve retention. So people definitely are more likely to stick around if they can feel that they have that psychological safety, they have comfort, they know where they stand, they don't have to overwork. Because otherwise people feel, well, I have something to prove and I'm going to work more if I'm not confident about if I'm coming in on 1 day a week and somebody else is coming in 3 days a week, well, maybe the boss will like that person more just because the boss sees that person more, which is kind of that proximity bias, right? But if you have those evaluations, you know that where you stand and you know what is the basis for your promotion going forward. The boss won't favor somebody else if you have an average of 3.5 and that person has an average of 3 out of 4, then you are much more likely to get that promotion, barring specific special cases.
Yeah, I guess just a comment, Dr. Gleb. So the idea here is to sort of set a fair playing field, a baseline for everyone, so that no one feels that anybody has an advantage, right?
Yeah, exactly. And so that's why it's a continuous promotion evaluation system where you know where you are at any time. Yep. Okay, good. And let's go on to integration of junior staff. So this has been an issue applied about, I think so. There have been something like 25% of the applied workforce has been hired during the pandemic, probably more now. that was the last survey. So this is a huge issue at applied. And this is an issue at EPBU, obviously. So hybrid work results in a major challenge with integration of junior staff. Now, we know that there's more close-knit connections to one's own team on average for junior staff who are hired, but there's weakening connections to other teams and to the whole organizational culture. So how do you integrate that cross-disciplinary collaboration? It's so important to the future of applied with all the technology, innovation. How do you get people integrated into the organizational culture as a whole, not simply into their team? This is really important for the future of applied. The best solution, I've very clearly seen from the research and from a number of other companies, is to establish a hybrid mentoring program. And I'm talking with Project Ascend, so Sanjeev Kumar and others, about what this would look like for applied as a whole, but individual business units are also starting to think about establishing a hybrid mentoring program. And here's what it would look like. It requires two mentors, not one mentor. One senior staff, not their supervisor, from one's own team, and another from another part of the business unit. So this is what's required. The mentor from your own team helps the junior employee with on-the-job training and with team bonding. So the actual practical aspects of their work. The on-the-job training is being able to immediately answer quick questions that the team member has, maybe show them for screen sharing or whatnot, or if you're in person to have that meeting. But the mentor from the other part of the business unit helps junior team member with forming connections across the business unit. So that addresses that weakening connections to other team and helps them integrate into the organizational culture of the business unit and applied as a whole. So that's the point of the other team member. It's that person is very, very important for addressing those weakening connections across team, those cross-disciplinary collaborations, those cross-silo collaborations, and then the whole organizational culture, the whole business unit organizational culture. That is very, very important. So having two mentors, very important and very valuable. Now, you don't have a very high workload, fortunately. For both mentors, meet with a mentee at least once a month for 20 to 30 minutes. Ideally, this will be done in person. I mean, sometimes it can be done in person, but ideally it will be done in person. And so that's not long. Meeting with mentees for once a month for 20 to 30 minutes, not a high workload. And then you do co-working sessions at least once a week. So that is where people just sign into a video conference call with each other and they work silently on their own individual tasks unless they have questions. So the mentee at this point, if they have questions on their tasks that they're doing, they can ask those questions during that period of time. So that's a period of time that doesn't take much overhead from the mentor, which is definitely a concern because they're able to work on their own work. And it's even, I've heard from mentors that they find it engaging and motivating. And of course, this is very helpful for the mentees. So this is a very, very useful approach to address integration of junior staff. And I'll be happy to take questions on it.
I have a question. This is Melissa.
Yes, Melissa.
I like this approach, the two mentors. What is the recommended duration or time frame for this? Is it like 3 months?
A year. A year, at least a year. Mhm.
And has this been from the companies that have implemented it that you've been in touch with? What is the, I guess, have they been committed to the full year?
Well, that has not been a full year, but
Is it just
one
started?
of the companies has had it already for 10 months, and they've been finding it really works well and getting people integrated. Other companies are more the 6 month, another company is for 3 months, another company is just rolling it out. But yes, this has been they've been the ones that have rolled out and have done it for a few months, they've been finding it very helpful. And this has
Great.
been ongoing. Mentees have been finding it incredibly helpful. It's solving the problem of integrating junior staff. Mentors have been finding it fulfilling to do so. And it
Great,
hasn't been
thank you.
taking up much time for them.
Yeah, I think the company is big on mentoring and mentees, and we have an NCG program that we have mentors for. It's just some of the feedback, or at least the struggles that we have, is really the commitment. But I'd be curious to kind of hear more about that feedback. But it's definitely beneficial for both. And people that do
Yeah.
participate it and finish it, the feedback is very positive.
What
I
I've
think,
seen,
Melissa, I would
go ahead.
Sorry, Melissa, I would add that within EPI, right, I see some groups doing this effectively, at least the senior staff part. I think the second mentor from another BU part is new to me, which seems very interesting.
Yeah.
But I do see some teams who do the senior staff mentoring, overall the retention rate as well as the overall experience for the new employee is much better compared to other teams where either for whatever reason they're not able to do it, or we're not doing it. This does, in my opinion, seem to be very important. And then the second mentor with another part of the BU, that's, I think, is an interesting idea. It could be very helpful, especially like you said, cross-functional and cross yeah, it's great.
Yes, and that second mentor, so when you look at the research and the experience of companies that have, what are the challenges with hybrid work? It's really the biggest challenge is that cross-functional collaboration because of the weakening connections, because you see each other people from other teams less, and you're less integrated into the culture of the business unit and the organization as a whole. So that second mentor from outside your team is incredibly helpful for that, because that is what that person focuses on. They help you. I mean, at each session, you talk to that person about your career development, and you talk about which people you should meet. And that person tells you about which people you should meet. I sent everyone the article about this, and you can read it afterward in part of the book. It describes the kind of questions you should be, that mentor should be asking that mentee, and the kind of connections they should be making for that mentee.
I have a
All right.
question in the chat.
Yes. Oh, yes. Okay, good. Do you see the gender bias also creeping into anxiety bias? Yes. So this is reflected by the fact that women overall prefer to do more remote work than men, and that women have more parenting and household responsibilities. So there's worries about flexibility. Women want more flexibility, and that feeds into the anxiety around proximity bias, that they spend more time working remotely. They don't work less overall, but they work more of their time from the home, and that creates, of course, a gender bias as a result of that unfortunate situation. Women still have more household responsibilities and parenting responsibilities than men do. Appreciate you asking that.
So I have one question. How do we select
Yes.
the second mentor? The first mentor is very understood who that
Mhm.
can be. The second mentor, how do you choose? How do you strategically choose the second mentor?
So the second
Whether
mentor,
do
you look
you?
at,
Yeah.
one way to do so is reciprocity from one team to another. So if you have some mentors from another team, you do so. Other is to look for volunteers, and I find that is very useful. So there are lots of people who are willing to help solve this problem. So again, look for senior people, not managers, not those, but people who are senior, experienced in the company. They want to help. They want to help others. They know this is a problem for the company. They know that is an issue. And of course, they should have some less tasks in other areas because they are doing mentoring, right? Just like you would have other sort of service responsibilities. That is kept in mind as you're doing your own tasks. So, but people asking for volunteers, I guarantee you will get many volunteers. And again, reciprocity also.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right. So, takeaways as you're thinking about this to address hybrid work disruption, NC's competitive advantage. Functional fixedness, we see that it's clearly an issue. Over half of you think it's a serious high, the biggest problem, very valuable to address this. And the other less than half of you think it's moderately valuable. So clearly, it's very important to address functional fixedness, optimizing business outcomes for you, despite personal discomfort, which these are uncomfortable things to do because they're new, right? So maximizing innovation, hybrid work. Virtually synchronous brainstorming, excellent technique. I will send the spreadsheet to everyone. It addresses burnout and proximity bias through the culture of excellence from anywhere and those weekly performance evaluations, especially for more junior team members, and integrating and training junior staff by developing a hybrid mentoring program in EPBU, one member from own team and another from another part of the EPBU. All of you here are managers in some way or other, and you have the power to implement these big KMs right now. And those who learn to lead successfully, I can guarantee to you in this hybrid environment, you'll be the ones who thrive in the future of work. All right, everyone. Now, 3 additional resources. I'll have a poll about this. You can ignore the tiny URL unless you can't use the poll. So it's my best-selling book and a free coaching session to integrate this information into your teams. And you're able to vote in the poll right now, and I'll be happy to take additional questions. Yes, Andia, do you have a question in the chat, or do you want to unmute yourself if the microphone works better? Cool. Other folks, questions, comments, feedback?
I think I personally like the mentor idea, and we'll try to do some form of implementation for that, Dr. Gleb.
Excellent.
We'll reach out to you, as we go through that process for some help. The other one I'm interested in is the asynchronous brainstorming. So we will find a use case where we'll try to use the Microsoft Forms and maybe give you some feedback on how it goes.
Wonderful.
And get some help if needed.
Sure.
Maybe we can even, if it's okay, invite you into 1 or 2 of the brainstorming for you to observe how things are going. And then
I'll be happy to facilitate as well, because that especially some of the steps going from step 2 to step 3, you know, that might be helpful.
Yeah. Okay, great.
Excellent. Good. Thank you. Anyone else have any comments and feedback, questions before we wrap up?
I think Aus had a comment in chat.
Okay. Let's see. Any data covering 5 days versus 4-day work week? Good. So we don't know yet. We know about the 4-day work week works best when you have the office-centric teams. From what we're seeing, that does not translate as much to the hybrid world. So when you have more flexibility, people actually prefer to work 5 days. I mean, some people work 6 days or 7 days, but they work less on the traditional Monday through Friday. So flexibility is more important. So again, the 4 days works best if you're office-centric, so fully time from the office. But for the hybrid modality, when you're coming in 1 or 2 days a week, people prefer flexibility, and there's more productivity and retention on that. Let's see. Any data covering dedicated hackathon innovation day or week? That I haven't seen of how specific day of the week. What works best is for teams to just put it into their workflow. So whenever they need to do it, that's when they should do it. So that's the appropriate stage for it. Whereas I have not seen that work, but I mean, some teams might benefit from trying it out. So I'd recommend experimentation. I just have not seen that other companies working in particular. Melissa?
So, Dr. Sorry,
Yes.
I had a question. You can take the chat question first. Sorry.
Okay, I'm looking at any data on typical workday number of hours in hybrid mode. Oh, so people tend to work a little bit more than the typical in-office day. They tend to work something like 9 hours or so, a little bit more, 9 to 10 hours on a typical day when they work remotely. Whereas when they work in the office, they typically work that 8-hour day. So that is what we're seeing. So people work on average about 20 hours more per month if they are working fully remotely. And of course, you know, if they're working 1 day a week in the office, they're working 8 hours that day, and maybe 9 hours in the rest of the days. Go ahead.
So the question I had was, do you think it's more effective if the hybrid work schedule is kind of predefined? In some other words, like, for example, you see news about Apple is asking people to come in on certain days, right, of the week. If it's defined that way, is it more effective from a collaboration and just in general work culture standpoint? Or do you see people kind of leaving it kind of as a define it as you go basis, where okay, if you have to come in, someone asked someone to come in, then they come in that particular day because there is an important meeting that having them being in person is, but the rest of it you kind of let them define based on their own kind of work schedule. What do you think is more effective, or what have you seen being more effective? Yeah.
Yes, from the research, including by Harvard Business School, we've seen that models like Amazon and Meta are more effective, where it's kind of a team-led model, where each individual team decides what works best for their team. And that allows flexibility for because it's decentralization of power, right? You're pushing down knowledge. The people who know best what each individual team needs are the lower ranking team members. They know what works best. So that way you get the lowest amount of overhead and the lowest amount of anxiety and stress and pressure that's not needed if the team members determine what works best. So, and there's some, of course, you can have some coordination. If one team collaborates frequently with another team, then you can have overlapping days when the teams come in. But what I generally see work really well is having each team establish at least 1 day a week when everyone comes to the office that day. And then everyone else can do whatever they want. Now, some team members, if you want to do a brainstorming on a different day, the synchronous meeting for the brainstorming, you come in that day as well. So it depends on collaboration. But having 1 day a week in the office, for most people, that works best. But some people work really well fully remotely. So it just depends on the person.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other folks before we wrap up? You're welcome, Sanjay. And let's see, Melissa, you're welcome. I'm glad this session proved helpful for you. All right, everyone. Good. I think that's all. And I really appreciate, I look forward to working with EPBU going further. And I'm glad that you found this beneficial. I'll send the information out to everyone. Bye-bye.
Great. Thank you so much, Dr. Clare.
You're very welcome.
Thank you, Vidya, for setting up. Thanks. Thank you, Vidya. This was really good.
You're very welcome. I'm glad this was helpful.